Well, hello there, this is Circle 30 coming at you from North Remembers, and today, as requested, I'm finally bringing you some information on how to protect your base against HGHB. This relatively new strategy that, albeit with a bit of luck for their healer pathing, seems to be able to defeat most current meta bases, also with the highest rate of spell swagging I think I've seen at Town Hall 9 ever for any single strategy. This video has been a rather long time coming for a few reasons. Firstly, I've been endlessly slowed down recording war recaps for the channel while BMW fires away, and also I've been spending the time gathering more up-to-date, newer ideas as the strategy has evolved just slightly over the last couple of weeks to where it can really come from any side of your base. Now, I'm going to make some disclaimers. Do not assume that if you sort of follow a couple of the tips I'm about to give you, your base is suddenly immune to the strategy. I've seen plenty of bases with a couple of the following pointers get roasted, such as mine. More on how you combat that later. And on a lighter note, nor should you assume that every way you can defend the strategy is documented here. But after a good deal of research, I can give you a few ways to get yourself started earning some defenses. It's a bit of a long video, so it's broken up into distinct sections in a semi-logical order, mainly to stop me from mashing all the advice into one huge incomprehensible mess, as I'm known to do from time to time. So I've got a skeleton base cooked for examples, and without further ado, here goes. So, the very first task you have to complete as an attacker in order to run your raids successfully is of course to get your troops into the base, and wherever there's an obligation for an attacker to complete an objective, there's an equal opportunity for the defender to come along and mess that objective up for them. As it turns out, HGHB can be a tricky raid to funnel if you disallow wizards from sniping peripheral structures before the giants are deployed, since the 12 or so giants break through walls relatively fast and will then go on to start destroying defences right where you want structures to pull your attacking units into the base. Another disadvantage with funneling this particular strategy is that it's analogous to a cold-blooded or single golem entry, so depending on where your defences are placed, there might be defences that aren't tanked for and are hence free to shoot down funneling units. Additionally, bowlers and the Archer Queen are not known for their obedient behaviour, and their ranged attack behind a melee giant attack often means that they're the only units that can target structures inside the first layer of walls, and this can be used to encourage them to wander off. So, with these observations, there are 3 simple steps you can take to make an effective funnel difficult to pull off, as demonstrated on this mock base. Firstly, try to lay out your defences so that some of them aren't tanked by the initial deployment of giants, so they can shoot down units taking out structures that are critical to funneling the attack properly. Secondly, the more hit points you force the attacker to burn through to create the funnel, the longer it will take. So with this in mind, try to make the funneling process as long as possible to give the attacking giants the time they need to break the wall and remove some of the defences that the attacker is trying to rely on to anchor their bowlers and queen inside the base. Finally, the best place to put your highest hit point anti-funneling structures such as storages is inside the first layer of walls as shown. For those who are interested, the reasoning follows the line of getting the attacking funnel units further towards more of your defences sooner, giving them more opportunity to be shot down before their task is complete. Any attacks that don't funnel the first layer as well as the peripheral structures risks bowlers or the queen leaving the attack rather sooner than your enemy would have hoped. So, a pro tip. These steps are actually easier to follow if your walls are slightly jagged or just stick out in some places but not others, as demonstrated here by this attack from Rob P going in on second frost from Blackhand side. And despite investing a giant and 3 wizards into funneling the left hand side, the defences that aren't tanked by the giants are going to prevent a suitable funnel from being made. This, along with the way this compartment sticks out slightly, and also the progress that the giants are already making through the base, is going to doom the bowlers and also eventually the queen to walking around the side of the base, setting the scene for a successful defense by second frost, making Rob very sad. So, now we've covered ruining the pathing of the bowlers and the heroes, now we'll move on to the giants, and this will obviously involve laying out some of your defences to path the giants out from in front of the heroes and bowlers to give some of your defences a clear shot at them. There are two ways you can go about it, the first of which is using defences outside the base, and if you're as old as I am, this might remind you of the old school golem pulls. This is similar. The best example on this base is at 8 o'clock, which would be one of the most popular entry points due to proximity to the queen and a dead zone to the right. Although on a fresh hit, the attacker would predict that his giants would beat the wall, they will actually repass to the Tesla, then the mortar, then even onto the Tesla on the far side, resulting in the giants being well away from where the attacker intended to enter the base. And the same thing applies for attacks coming in from 10 o'clock by the Barbarian King. Now, pro tip. The tolerance or limit for giants repathing is 7 tiles. That is, measuring from its current location. Count the number of tiles the giant has to walk to the exposed defense and the defense behind the wall. If the exposed defense is further away by 7 tiles or less, the giant will reroute as shown here. If not, the giant will beat the wall. So the magic number is 7 tiles. Make sure, however, that in trying to lure giants away from their entry point, you don't leave your Teslas too exposed, since they could be sniped and have their effect nullified on a cleanup hit. This base is a good example for this. Both Teslas are covered well by other defences, both ground and air. So that's the outside of the base, but the idea for inside the base is very similar. The only real difference is that there's an extra parameter at play, and that's the way your wall structure is laid out. Now, the thing you absolutely want to avoid is compartments that run deep into the base, because under 4 raged healers, the attacking giants are more or less invincible. So near the centre of your base, the giants will be distracting a huge number of defences directly in front of the bowlers and heroes very effectively. Conversely, one of the best compartment layouts is to have long, thin compartments around the sides of your base. This example takes this concept to the extreme, with a slender compartment wrapping a third of the base. This will help to effectively defend or discourage a HGHB attack coming in from anywhere on this compartment. But bear in mind that, as with outside the base, the corners of the defences that the giants will attack need to be 7 tiles apart or less, since the distances are measured from where the giants are, not the locations of the defences themselves. A few other notes here regarding walls. Try to have as many compartments in your base as possible. Obviously, the more walls the giants need to break through, the slower they'll be. So unless you're deliberately attempting to path giants away from the bowlers, as with these slender compartments, you should put as many walls in your base as you can. For this reason, I would always recommend compact bases over bases that are more spread out. Not just defending HGHB, but anything really. The compact bases, although slightly harder to make, have always proven to be more effective in my experience. All of these tips, by the way, are going to encourage your attacker to switch out one of his heals or one of his rages for a jump spell, which is a major decrease in firepower for the attacker, so definitely something you should try to do. Easy, I hear you cry. Just flip the giants off the map as they enter the Queen Chamber. Well, yes and no. I'm not going to go into depth about how you path springs, but I will give some overarching comments on what sort of areas you should be looking to put your flippers, and my number one comment is not to concentrate them in one place, anticipating a particular attack angle. Devastating though it would be, for example, to place 3 spring traps in a line here and insta-flip 9 giants, from almost any other angle they are essentially useless, and one of the key tenets of good war-based design is flexibility. To this end, you shouldn't bank on just 1 or 2 entry angles with your springs, and also they are best placed where they're pathed well for both giants and hogs, lest the section that you thought would be trampled by giants is actually subjected to a back-end hog attack. So to conclude, I probably wouldn't use springs in more than pairs. That would allow you 3 areas in the base with quite reasonable flipping power provided they're pathed effectively. The only other comment I'll make is that, short of compromising their versatility, you should try to put your springs near the outer edges of your base, since the earlier the giants and hogs are sprung off the map, the greater the effect on the attack. Now, a key part of the strength of HGHB is the 4 healers that are included in the standard army composition, and they work so well because, to an extent, it doesn't matter what they decide to heal. As I've mentioned in a couple of war recaps also, that the healers are effective on all the other main components of the raid, so leaving healers unchecked is a very dangerous thing to do. Since the healer buff a while back made them immune to air traps and their location is always behind other units, the only way you can reliably kill healers is by using air defenses. With this in mind, it's imperative as a step 1 that your base has roughly evenly spaced air defences all in the ring of fire as shown here, where they're not cored but also not exposed to sniper hogs or heroes. Although this is a good and almost necessary start, it isn't sufficient, so you will also have to take a few measures to prevent your ADs from being killed too easily, even with a kill squad under rage. So to avoid your ADs being killed by giants, you have a relatively simple task, still easier said than done, which is to path your giants around the ADs, or at least delay them from reaching the ADs as long as possible, either with other defences or walls. Bowlers, however, are arguably more of a threat because of their extended attack range, but bear in mind they will only actively attack the first target in front of them at the same range as a wizard. This means that, like the wizard, buildings that have 2 tiles between them and the wall are effectively invisible to the bowlers, and they can only hit it by either breaking the wall first or hitting it with their second bounce, which can be prevented by putting in front of the AD either buildings with low health or ideally just traps or nothing, if you like that sort of thing. As for defending ADs from the Queen, well, you budding Queen Walkers will know that you have to put 4 clear tiles between an AD and any walls that you want to protect it. So if you can do this without exposing yourself to another strategy, then great. Else, there are other methods to temporarily neutralize the Queen, which I shall explain later. So here to illustrate, I've dug up this replay of Krieg attempting a HGHB raid on Hamed from Warbears, and the thing to look out for here is that AD by the Town Hall, which has that 2-tile buffer in front of it. As the kill squad comes down on the area, that small dead zone will deflect the kill squad away from it, forcing the healers to expose themselves to the air defense, and they are promptly evaporated. So, you've defended the kill squad acceptably, great. However, the attacker now has 16 hogs and 2 heals to throw at you, so you'd better have a plan to stop them too. And the best advice I can give for this stage of the attack is on kill zones, and this is a generalization of the infamous Tesla farm technique of grouping your Teslas together to create a small area of incredibly high DPS. Using this base as an example, here in the right hand corner we have a Tesla farm of sorts, but it's made of a mixture of defences. It still provides a very high DPS output in a small area, and this is what's called a kill zone, simply because a lot of hogs would die if you sent them at the defences on their own. It works particularly well in this instance because the Wizard Tower has a lot of health to hold up the hogs for a long time while the Teslas, X-Bow and Archer Tower just lay into them, and so you'd be insane to surgically approach this corner without using quite a few hogs and a heal spell to work them through the area. Now the icing on the cake for this kill zone technique is to follow up the high DPS area with a low DPS area containing a bomb, or even 2 waiting for the hogs, which would either force a second heal spell quickly or just outright kill them, which is extremely good value. Since HGHB doesn't feature any lengthy queen walks or such like, you can afford to push a DGB a little further out to lie in wait for a group of hogs that have just used a heal to survive a kill zone, but do make sure you don't make yourself vulnerable to other strategies if you do this. Springs are also extremely effective at slowing a wave of hogs, but remember that if you're exploding hogs with DGBs anyway, it would probably be best to put your springs elsewhere. Well, yes, but maybe no. Although a HGHB entry from the non-AQ side would likely take out some DGBs or some kill zones, you now have an arsenal of other techniques you can use to prevent a HGHB attack from being generally successful from that side. For example, remember those springs you wanted to put by your Archer Queen to stop giants? Well, since you also pathed them to work against hogs, they'll now be effective as a back-end defense against them. So all is not lost, it's just a case of making sure you have every entry angle covered using a couple of techniques from the list so far. So if you're struggling to see where your base is at, here's a neat visualization method to help you out. You want to draw a few 360-degree rings around the edge of your base, either on a screenshot or in your head, and you proceed as follows. Firstly, identify a method of HGHB defense, then work out what range of angles it will be effective from, and mark them on a ring of your choice as follows. So I've got some Teslas here that would mess up giant pathing, and I know that the limit for a Tesla pulling giants is 7 tiles. So this defense will be effective on precisely these angles of attack. Then continue marking from which entry points different defense methods will work from your base, and when you're finished, you'll basically have a map of sorts showing a rough qualitative guide to how strong your base is against any given angle HGHB can come from. This map will give you the most reliable information if you're as picky as possible. You need to be a realistic and pessimistic thinker here, and try to have at least 2 layers of defense covering your whole base. A final comment here is that you can reduce the number of possible entry angles to defend simply by leaving a few defenses outside your base to anchor the giants towards, but be sure not to put out too many, just so you don't give up too many defenses so easily. So there's just one thing left I have to cover, and that's where you should put your clan castle and what you should dump inside it. Now, I mentioned that there were some other methods to distract the queen that I would talk about later, so notice that in the HGHB army composition of giants, healers, bowlers, hogs and heroes, notice that the only unit that can shoot an air CC is the queen. So my strongest recommendation is that at the very least some of your CC is dedicated to air units. There's a spectrum of options you can use here. If you want to distract the queen and potentially save yourself some air defences that are less than 4 tiles away from a wall, use a tanky troop such as a dragon or even a lava hound if you're really banking on AD protection. Alternatively, you can use some balloons to try to kill the giants. Note that only balloons are truly effective in doing this, because if the 1,000 hit points or so of damage that's needed to kill the giants is spread out over any length of time, the healers that may well be under rage will heal the giants back up incredibly quickly. However, a word of caution about balloons. They move an attack slowly enough as it is, even disregarding the effects of poison, so you will need to lay out defences in such a way that the giants are pathed directly underneath the balloons. If the giants are allowed to skew off under rage as shown here, the balloons will miss. The other danger is that poison does eventually kill balloons on their own, and once they're at about half health, a queen can one-shot them, so I would recommend a tank of some kind, preferably an air tank, to keep her off the balloons as long as possible. However, one advantage of using high DPS units instead of the Hound is that you can move the CC out of the core of the base and actually use it to defend HGHB from a particular side in a different way. Notice the position of this CC. It has a significant proportion of its radius poking outside the perimeter walls, and so deploying giants there would activate the CC immediately, which causes all sorts of problems. The attacker could drop a rage on his healers to keep the giants alive, or deploy the queen, in addition to some poison spells. But even if the giants survive, in the worst case scenario for the defender, either of these options make it harder to funnel into the base, so well worth considering that to help you defend another angle. So that's all for now, folks. I've finally run out of tips. If you're still here, congratulations, you are now a pro HGHB defender. Go out there, force some funnel fails, and flip some hogs. Many thanks to the base building team at North Remembers for helping me out brainstorming and testing these strategies, and let me know down in the comments if you found the guide helpful, if you want more similar content in the future or not, or you just want your base reviewed. Speaking of which, I have a new email that you can send bases to. It is nr.circle30@gmail.com. So, looking forward to hearing your thoughts, worries and qualms, and until the next time, this is Circle 30 reminding you to stay frosty.